Start it, Sharon.
Yep. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, Building the Talent Pipeline, Adult Education's Role in Apprenticeship Success. Very excited to have Karyn Goven and Patrick Brown on. And before they introduce themselves, I just want to say we're very excited about National Apprenticeship Week. If you haven't been following us on social media, you would see that we have been posting each day a student success story for an adult learner who has become, gone through an apprenticeship program and gotten a great job as a result. But also, we have a number of resources that we've made available through the Center of Excellence in Apprenticeship that's funded through Department of Labor that COE participated in. And we also are partnering with Department of Labor on National Apprenticeship Week. This is really important to the field, and I'm going to let Karyn explain why. But we are delighted you're here, and we've been seeing some folks introduce themselves in the chat box. We want to give you the opportunity, if you've not done so yet, to do so. Any questions you have, you can post in the Q&A. Okay, so Karyn, we'll turn it right over to you and to Patrick.
Oh, welcome. And thank you, Sharon. And thank you, everyone, for being part of this COIB Apprenticeship Week. My name is Karyn Goven. I'm the Senior Director of Workforce Development at MySide. We're a nonprofit agency located in Southwest Detroit. I also serve as the Director of Innovations at COIB. This new position allows COIB to expand services to the field and support innovative practices. As a COIB Director of Innovations, I've always been asked, what is innovation? There are many definitions of this word, and I'm thinking, how can we tie innovation into adult education? It can be daunting. I think innovation as moving to the progression of what's next, what's on the horizon, emerging best practices, new ideas. Innovation doesn't have to be a shiny, finished product. It doesn't have to be technology. For us at COABE, it's about advancing sustainability and strengthening and aligning our programs through education, workforce, and leadership. It's really to meet the needs of our learners. As we participate in Apprenticeship Week, we think about looking at workforce development and apprenticeship as an innovative practice. Apprenticeships combine paid on-the-job training at their place of employment with classroom instruction to prepare workers for highly skilled careers. And this is what we want for our participants. In the United States, an apprenticeship earns an average of $54,000. Apprenticeships are employer-focused, but they also focus on education and training. This makes adult education programs a gateway for our programs and our participants to become apprenticeship ready and to gain that credibility with employers. We see it growing in the field of adult education. So how do I get started? There are many pathways to get there. Can begin with a strong partnership with your WIOA partners. You can create contextualized education. You can integrate education and training through IET, or integrate English literacy and civics education through IELCE programs. You can partner with career technical education programs, or you might even have one in-house. This leads to pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeship models. We also have a framework like Talent Pipeline Management, or TPM, to guide this in working with employers and creating workshops and apprenticeships. Make sure you look into all the resources that's available at COABE. You can do this too. I've worked at this. I started with as a simple adult education program, and we transitioned to partnering with trainers for credentials. We did it for high school credit. We utilized career path navigators or career coaches to help teachers integrate curriculum, invite guest speakers into the program, and to help participants to assess their interests and to help them understand the steps towards career path. These are the first key steps into how you're going to transition to workforce. We realized that we can't be trainers. We could not be a trainer, but we partnered and allowed us to create an IET and an IELCE. Eventually, we met the requirements for a pre-apprenticeship by utilizing NCCER. Small, easy steps helped us move forward and does not take away from our mission of always upskilling and educating our participants. It just enhanced our program and it helps your participants to be at the table with employers. Speaking of experts in the field, I am really excited to introduce our speaker today. He began his career as a AmeriCorps member, worked as an adult education program, moved into an association leadership position, then to Michigan College Access Network, and now serves as the adult education manager for the State Department. I've had the privilege of knowing Patrick Brown for over 10 years, and his passion for adult education, his commitment to participants and programs is evident in the dedication and innovation he's brought to all the programs that he participated from McKay to MCAN and now the state. Today, Patrick will speak about the critical role adult education plays in workforce development, not only in providing foundational skills, but also helping to design and deliver workforce education and training. So Patrick, thank you for taking the time to join us at COABE at our Apprenticeship Week.
Thank you, Karyn, and thank you, COABE, for your continued support of so many of the really important pieces of adult education and training throughout the country and the nation. I had a wonderful experience, a wonderful time at the COABE conference, and so I hope those of you that attended got so much out of it. It was rejuvenating as well as just a wonderful learning opportunity. I'm so excited about COABE, what COABE is doing, the innovations that COABE is making, and we're all here to celebrate Apprenticeship Week and the connection between apprenticeship and adult education. Thanks again for that introduction, Karyn. So today we'll talk about adult education's role in apprenticeship success. I hope some things that you'll think about and take away today after the session are thinking about how does your individual program, your regional program, your statewide adult education network, how do you connect with apprenticeship? How are you a good partner in that apprenticeship landscape? Do you understand the landscape better after today's session? And are you thinking about ways in which you can expand your program to meet the needs of employers, partners in workforce development, but most importantly, the passions and needs of students within your individual program? As Karyn said, I sit at the unique vantage point of our Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. Our adult education programming is housed within our Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, as well as our apprenticeship office. They're literally right down the hall. And so it's a great opportunity to think about this. And we've got some great templates and examples to share about what that looks like. So today, what will we talk about? We're really going to focus on the basics, adult education and apprenticeships. Where are there overlapping connections? Where is there existing partnership? Where is there room for opportunity and growth and investment? We want to focus this on you. Where do you understand the dynamics in your state? How do you start, as Karyn said, this process to begin to think about whether or not your program is ready to partner in an apprenticeship model? we'll examine the data. We can't talk about doing programming without the data that exists internally within our own adult education programs, at the regional level, at the state level, at the national level. We really do have to look at that first and understand that as adult education experts and professionals. Then we've got to learn the vocabulary and the terminology. We really have to talk the talk. We know that so much of the work that we do in education has a lot of acronyms. Well, workforce development and apprenticeship has just as many acronyms as well. So we do need to take that time to understand that landscape so that we can really play in that same sandbox. And then we hope to leave you with a few starter points. Where can you find similar resources within your state or even national resources to begin the conversation? COABE is such a great resource for so many things and such a great connectivity. And then we'll have some time to start and think about where you can get started. Throughout the presentation, if you've got comments or questions, we invite you to put them into the chat or the Q&A. We'll have time for questions at the end, but certainly we want to encourage you to be active and participatory. And this is also kind of a kickoff, if you will, to an ongoing dialogue for COABE. We want to know what resources we can continue to provide for you in this area around apprenticeships. So if you wouldn't mind starting, I would love for you to think about this question. Imagine apprenticeships for adults. What is one word that you think of that comes to mind? And would love if you take a moment and just put those into the chat. I'll give you all about 30 seconds and you can put some of those comments into the chat. I love some of the feedback that folks are giving around opportunity, growth, economic potential, and advancement. Those are all great comments. Some of the words that often come to mind when we think about apprenticeship, particular to our state in Michigan, are opportunity, sometimes challenges, sometimes not sure, even though that's two words. So maybe you're feeling some of that today as well. Our hope is that by the end of this presentation, you'll see some of those opportunity and growth areas. In addition, I'd love to ask you this question. What are you hoping to learn about the connection between adult education and apprenticeships today? There certainly is an important connection between the two. We come into this presentation knowing that there are novices among us in this connection, and there are experts. There are folks that have been working on this for decades about this integration between education and training. So we'd love to capture from you what you would learn to hope to learn today, as well as in ongoing professional development opportunities. Thanks for taking the time to respond to those questions. I'll give about 10 more seconds for folks to respond and appreciate all the feedback that you're giving in the chat. Something else I'd like to share as you're thinking about those questions and we get into our presentation is considering the options with our participants in mind. We can't forget that. I think one of the things Michigan is doing as we prepare next week for our state annual conference is thinking about the impact that our decision-making, both in policy and programming, has on students. So I hope that you'll keep that in mind at the forefront. Your particular individual student population needs are so important, and they're central and integral to your programmatic efforts. They may look different than some of your peers on this call. So some of the dialogue that we have and some of the conversation that we talk about may look slightly different in your state, and that's okay. But this presentation is hopefully an opportunity for you to consider and take away where there are similarities and commonalities in some of the examples that we reflect upon, and where you might go in search of different options and different opportunities. I also want to underscore that apprenticeship is one pathway option for our learners, just like post-secondary arch or training. Our goal and our role is not to push a particular participant into one pathway or another. Adult education is about helping that learner identify what goals they have and what direction they might like to move in. However, we do need to also think about the fact that many of these pathways have been underdeveloped for our learners. And so apprenticeship should complement your programming. Think supplement, not supplant. Right? It adds to and enhances your programming, but doesn't take away from the fundamental work that you do in adult education. One thing I want you to keep in mind as well is that the eligibility criteria that you have in that for adult education may be different than the eligibility criteria for adult education or for your workforce development partners. We know this in adult education, right? But it's just something to consider. This pathway may not be the best pathway for many individuals, and that's okay. Um, Also, I want you to think about something that Karyn said. Impactful partnerships can be small. You may start with a cohort of apprenticeships that's 4, 5, 10. We'd love to see apprenticeships that go into the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the hundreds. But even those small, impactful, incremental steps can be so important. So, where do we start? First, understanding the dynamics in your area, your region, your local municipality, your county, your state, wherever kind of your geographic boundaries are. That's the first place to start. You know how they say all politics is local, all apprenticeships are local. So thinking about the impact that your program has in the local area that you cover is where you want to start. So here's a pre-check for you. And you can think about these internally, or you could choose to respond to the chat as well. But these are kind of 4 key questions that I really think are critical for you to think about as you're getting ready and thinking about apprenticeships and integrated education and training. Consider, does my state have a attainment or apprenticeship or workforce goal? And are you aware of that? Most states, they do. They outline specific multi-year goals. Some of that will come from your governor's office. Some of that will come from your legislature, your Department of Labor. But does your local area, your regional or your state have goals related to a credential attainment or apprenticeship? The example I'll give is that in Michigan, we do have a goal. We have something called 60 by 30 to increase the percentage of Michigan residents with degrees or potential or post-secondary certificates to 60% by 2030. 60 by 30. That's really critical. Adult education plays an important role in that, as well as if you're going to be contributing to a secondary credential or a post-secondary credential or certificate or apprenticeship. All of those are often considered in those goals. So that would be a place to start. Secondly, does my program or state have a public campaign? Do people know about the programming that you do? Are there resources available to latch onto to talk about? An example is that Michigan has a statewide adult education and apprenticeship marketing tools, resources. Some of those are at varying levels and degrees. Some of that is localized, some of that is regionalized, some of that is at the statewide level, but there are resources available to do that. Understanding what those tools are and where those are marketed and to whom is a really good first step as well, to understand on behalf of your participants, as well as the partners that you may be encountering as you think about moving into this apprenticeship space. Does your state or program have an advisory board? At your individual program, do you have employer engagement? Do you have individuals or connections with the Chamber of Commerce, so local workforce development leaders? Does your state have something similar? In Michigan, as with probably all states, you have a statewide workforce development board. There is an adult education representative there. Under WIOA, it's required, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, that all local and regional workforce development boards have an adult education representative as well. In Michigan, we're unique in that we also have a Michigan Apprenticeship Advisory Board. We jokingly, lovingly call it the MAAB, MAAB, but when you say it too fast, it sounds like mob. But the Michigan Apprenticeship Advisory Board and our adult education partners sit at that table. And so they contribute to kind of the apprenticeship vision strategy for our state and what that will look like. Your state may have something similar. It may not be called the Apprenticeship Advisory Board. It may be a part of the Workforce Development Board. But understanding if there's something in place for that or where those meetings might be happening is an important step in getting ready. Lastly, something to consider and to think about is the data. Does my state track the major industries where apprenticeships are currently active, as well as future forecasted? Much of this is in alignment with the work that we do under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, right? In Michigan, we have a Central Bureau of Data. It's called our Michigan Center for Data Analytics. The United States has a Department of Labor. We have a Bureau and Labor Statistics Department at the federal level. You probably have something similar within your state, or your local workforce development board has access to those data resources. It would be important to connect and to find that resource and to consider what resources capture some of that data in your area. Those 4 questions are going to be critical questions as you continue on this road to apprenticeship readiness for your program, and then on behalf of your participants. And when we think about designing with the end in mind, these are the critical questions that you're going to have to answer to have a robust adult education program that's paired with an apprenticeship program. You're going to have to consider and state how this directly aligns to regional and statewide goals for credential attainment. You're going to have to think about, where do we market and share this information, and who's aware of the education and apprenticeship opportunities available. You're going to have to think about, who are the people that need to know that their partnership is going to be created, and who is already doing this work that we can tap into. And then lastly, what does the data tell us? The last thing we want to do is design and work on programs that will not lead individuals to family-sustained waging careers and jobs. And so understanding that data and the trajectory of industry in your local, regional, or statewide landscape is so important. So first, let's take each one of those at a time. Let's start with examining the data. Here are some examples of how you might do that. The first is understanding and examining your state or your local adult education data. Locally or at your state level, your adult education program has some sort of a reporting system. It varies state to state. What's important is that the National Reporting System, which is a tool and a resource that our national adult education programs report into, captures and reports a lot of that data. It captures basic demographic information. It captures barriers that our adult learners identify in those programs. It also captures credential attainment and employment outcomes. That's an important piece. At the fundamental core of this is understanding your own data, whether you're working at a statewide level or a local level. So you might want to first start looking at your local adult education reporting system, if you have your own, your statewide reporting system, or the national reporting system for some of that data. And we'll talk about what things you might look at in that area in a moment. Second, you should work to identify and understand your state or local regional labor market trends. I just talked about, in Michigan, we have something called the Center for Data or Labor Analytics. Similarly, in other states, your Department of Labor, if you have a workforce board, they may report on those. What's nice is that they may also produce a report, like I'll show you that our Center for Data reports on every few years, that's already pre-populated. So you don't have to do a lot of digging. It's already published and publicly available. So look for a resource like that to get started as well. And then lastly, when we think about examining the data, it's important that we're understanding who key training providers are and where they are located. We talk about that a lot. Who's providing some of this training? Who's providing and leading us into this apprenticeship space? Most states or workforce development boards have an approved training provider list. Sometimes that's public. Sometimes you need to request that information. Our state has a publicly accessible website where you can see state and local approved training providers. You can go onto that public website and you can look and you can see who those training providers are in your area. That would be an important tool to find and locate within your area or your state to do. If you can start with those 3 steps in terms of examining the data, it will really set you on a strong path to understand the landscape and the connectivity between your adult education programming and the apprenticeship opportunities that exist in your state. And I call this a pre-check because much of this work should be done before you even begin maybe a dialogue with other individuals. See what you can find for yourself first. Do a little bit of homework before you get going down the road. Here's an example that I just wanted to give to you. This data comes to us in Michigan from our Michigan Adult Education Reporting System. So all of our WIOA federally funded and state funded adult education programs capture a series of different data points. I just pulled this particular data point from 2016 and then a snapshot of our statewide data from 2024. This shows our total adult education participants in Michigan. This is just one piece of critical data, but we can extrapolate so much from. And so I would encourage you to think about doing this for your own program or at a statewide level and thinking about this. The question that I pose to you is, what workforce relevant data might you find here that might be relevant in your conversation as you're thinking about apprenticeship? The first thing that I go to are age demographics and breakdowns. So much of the conversation around adult education and whether or not our participants are ready for training or that's a population that we should prioritize for training and apprenticeship is focused on age. Well, in Michigan, in particular, in this example, both in 2016 and in 2024, a majority of our age demographic is at the working age, between 19 and 24, and 25 and 44, 45 and 54. Those age demographics combined make up more than 3/4 of the population in adult education. So a part of that is understanding, is your population work ready? Are they at that working age? What are the characteristics and the demography of the adult education participants that you have within your programming? That's a great place to start. It's a simple, easy step to really command and have mastery over the language that you're going to use and the data and the talking points that you're going to develop for your own program or for your statewide data. It took one report to pull this data. I put it into Excel and made these beautiful charts and graphs. Maybe took me altogether a half an hour to pull all of that together. I would encourage you to think about doing something similar. Maybe look at gender. You could look at different performance outcomes for your particular demography. You could look at ABE versus ESL, but keep it simple. Start with maybe one or two different reports to really kind of understand your student population and the adult learners that you're trying to serve within your adult education program first. And the reason why is that as you begin to have conversations with training providers and employers and partners in apprenticeship, they're going to ask those questions. Who are your learners? How will they provide or fill a gap within our employment sectors? How will they be an asset to our industry? And you can have some of this data that's very relevant to consider and to think about. You might also think about information around how many are parents, right? And how many are, if you have other secondary characteristics, how many are employed, right? Those are all kind of important pieces that will help tell the story. Here's another example. This is our barriers, right? So all of our adult learners in our state identify key challenges or barriers to education at their point of entry. We did a comparison between 2016, 2024. You'll see that some of the most significant markers that were indicated were English language learning, school-age children, parents of school-age children. You'll also see low levels of literacy or low income. These all become talking points as well to your workforce partners and to your apprenticeship partners, is understanding the assets, even though these are barriers, the assets that are underneath each one of these barriers. It's a simple way to kind of categorize and think about what your adult learner populations are facing, but also the opportunities that they can bring to the landscape. Another place that you might think about that I mentioned is looking at your Center of Data Analytics or your labor department. This is a report that our Department of Data and Analytics produces. It's a forecast for the job outlook. And so in Michigan, it's called the Hot 50 Job Outlook. And so many of our adult education providers and workforce development providers look at these reports. What's nice about this report is it does a statewide overview as well as a regional overview. And many of our adult education providers operate, even if they're at a local area, they do operate kind of within a regional municipality as adult learners are coming from different parts of that region. So how might you think about looking at something like this, or a tool or resource? Think about, what is the career outlook trajectory for your particular geography? What is the career outlook for particular industries that exists around you? And from there, you can begin to extrapolate the connectivity between your program, the assets that your participants have, and how you can begin to partner with an employer or a training provider or an apprenticeship opportunity. In Michigan, what's the data indicates to our state, which is a great indicator for adult education being a training provider and apprenticeship partner, is that 90% of the hot 50 jobs in Michigan are going to require some sort of additional education past a high school diploma or an equivalency. And this outlook in particular goes through the year 2032. So when we look at all of those different industries, healthcare and business and science and technology, all of those different industries are indicating, in Michigan at least, that you'll need some additional training. That helps us talk to employers about why we need to bring those training opportunities into our adult education programs, and certainly helps us to talk to adult education learners themselves about what opportunities they can be taking advantage of as well. So I'd encourage you to think about and look at, if you have something like this within your own state. Sometimes they're also produced at a county-wide level. How can you access information like this to help you understand and know what the forecast looks like in your particular area? The third piece of data that I think would be important for you to consider to look at is if your local workforce development board has a publicly available training provider list. Often they are approved training providers. We have one in Michigan. This is just an example. And so students themselves, as well as practitioners like ourselves, can go on to this training search. You can type in what sort of opportunity you might be looking for. You can then choose what type of programming format or educational delivery model that you'd like to see. You can look at what type of degree or certificate offerings or certifications you'd like to do. Maybe it's starting with an industry recognized credential or a short-term training, or maybe it's building to an associate's or bachelor's or higher. And you can begin to search. You can also filter by zip code, county, city, or region. Many states have similar tools. Some of them are publicly available tools. Some of them are privately funded entities. But finding your tools in your areas and going to your local workforce board and asking where you might be able to find this information will be helpful. What it can do then is lead you, in addition to understanding the landscape of what job industries are kind of the growing industries in your area, it can then point you to what employers and training providers are connected in those same industries. And those are probably going to be the folks that you're going to begin this apprenticeship conversation with. Every state looks different. So this would be my little asterisk here to say that perhaps this is a PDF version that your local workforce partners have available. And so you may have to dig a little bit for some of this information. We recognize that the example that I'm showing here from Michigan is kind of the ultimate kind of highest level of accessibility, right? Is that it's publicly available. Students can even go out and find these opportunities, but certainly somewhere under WIOA, these are provisions that are required. And so these resources exist. It's just a matter of kind of locating them within either your local, regional, or statewide area. So kind of bringing it back and dissecting that little piece of the kind of the pre-check and getting ready. Start small. Think about the data in your local program, your region, your state. Maybe you look at population totals. Maybe you look at age. Maybe you look at gender. Keep it simple. Keep it there. Maybe you then look at those growing industries. Identify 5. There might be 20. There might be 30. Identify 5. Start simple. Think about those 5 industries in your local area. Then look at that employer training list. Again, there are probably, depending on where you live, there could be a few. If you live in a more rural area, if you live in a more suburban or urban setting, there could be hundreds. So think about two key employers or training providers that might be listed, that are already partnering in this space, that maybe match that growing industry that you might be able to work with and to think about connecting with. All of this will take you a little bit of time. It may take you several hours to compile this information, but this is an important step in beginning that process before you then start engaging in the networking, in the connecting, and in the growth opportunity with other partners. I would really encourage you to think about investing the time necessary to identify those pieces of data so that you can feel informed when you go and meet with some of these partners. The second piece, we've got the data. The second piece is understanding the terminology, talking the talk. If you are new to adult education or you've been in adult education a long time, every other word is an acronym, is it not? The same exists in workforce development and particularly in apprenticeship. So in apprenticeship, we need to understand the vocabulary and the terminology. Often that can be confusing. Often there are similarities, though, between our adult education, but it's understanding what that lingo is that they use and then matching it with our adult education language so that we're beginning to be able to translate between the workforce apprenticeship and adult education. So here's one example of talking the talk as it relates to apprenticeship. In apprenticeship, you'll often hear OA or SAA. OA refers to an Office of Apprenticeship state. Every state within our great country and territory has some sort of an apprenticeship body that is leveraging resources, connecting partners, and oftentimes involved in the approval of apprenticeships within your state. It would be important to identify for your state whether or not you have an Office of Apprenticeship, an OA, or an SAA, a state apprenticeship agency. OAs, and in a moment I'll show you a graphic so that you can see a map of the United States. An Office of Apprenticeship state has all registered apprenticeship programming and registration oversight that's governed by the Department of Labor, and federal staff operate in field offices through an OA state. Michigan is an OA state. Even though we have our own registered apprenticeship office that I mentioned earlier, that's right down the hall from my office, those are all state employees. Michigan has made that commitment that we have to have state workers in addition to our federal counterparts. Our federal office works hand in hand with our state office around apprenticeship. All of the OA states use a system called RAPIDS, the Registered Apprenticeship Partners Information Data System. That includes all the tracking and the compliance for all of the registered apprenticeships in the state. Separately, you may be in a state apprenticeship agency state. Those registered apprenticeship programs are managed by state employees acting on behalf of the Department of Labor. You may be in a little bit of a hybrid situation like Michigan is. These states may use their own systems alongside or instead of that national RAPIDS system. So you have an OA and an SAA. That'll be important for you to understand which apprenticeship tool your state uses and how your state is governed. Here is a simple map so you can kind of do a quick spot check and see whether you are an SAA, which is in a darker blue, or Office of Apprenticeship OA, which is in this lighter kind of blue, kind of clear color. I've included a link here as well. And those links may be going into the chat, but certainly after the presentation, they'll be emailed with this presentation as well. But you can go to apprenticeship.gov. You can search by your state. You can also search by your zip code. You can find your state apprenticeship office. What that resource will also show you is who the contact is at that apprenticeship office. Now, I'm not encouraging you today to go in and contact that apprenticeship person. I think you got to do that pre-work right before you begin that conversation. But you can certainly check and see. Maybe you know them. Maybe they're your neighbor. Maybe you've heard of them. Maybe you've been in a meeting with them. Understanding that landscape is going to be very important, and understanding how your state operates, whether you're an SAA state or an O state, will be important. You may not have to understand all of the dynamics of that, or kind of the distinction between the two right at this preparatory point, but it is important to know and understand. Again, these agencies are responsible for registering apprenticeships with the Federal Office of Apprenticeship, setting standards, coordinating statewide apprenticeship programs, connecting training partners, workforce partners, employers. Think of it as like an equivalent to your adult education office within your state. Does similar things, right? Approves those standards, approves and usually provides the funding for those programs that are apprenticeships, and makes those connections either through professional development, communities of practice, very similar kind of a model. It's also important some vocabulary. There's a lot of vocabulary in apprenticeship. I just picked these top 6 because these are the most kind of commonly referenced terms in apprenticeship. RTI, OJT, pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship standards, an intermediary, a RAP. You'll hear that acronym as you begin in this apprenticeship space. And understanding these 6 components will be really critical and important. What is nice is that if you have an integrated education and training program already under WIOA Title II AFLA, you probably identify with many of these things already. They just are labeled differently and they're called different, and their definition, though, looks very similar. Related technical instruction is that educational component, right? On the job training under an apprenticeship includes some sort of workplace, hands-on training, usually a significant amount of time for on-the-job training, but that varies by occupation. A pre-apprenticeship is a preparatory pathway. I want you to understand that. Using that terminology and that language as you begin to think about your adult education program, either informally or formally, and we'll show you an example in a minute of that formal. Your adult education program is the perfect spot to become that pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship ready place. Apprenticeship standards. Every apprenticeship has a framework of competencies, a curriculum, work processes, the training hours required, very similar to like an adult education where we have a curriculum and we have standards. An intermediary is the person who holds those standards. So an adult education program holds those standards for adult education. The intermediary could be a business on the apprenticeship side. It could be a local workforce development board. It could be a consortium of different entities. It could be an association. That varies different than an adult education, but it's important to identify and know who intermediaries are for apprenticeship. And then a registered apprenticeship program, a RAP. That is the actual program and what is called a federally or state approved program that has on-the-job training, related technical instruction, and has national standards. So I know we're breezing through that terminology. You'll receive this slide deck at the conclusion, but those are kind of the fundamental basic apprenticeship 101 that I would take some time in understanding, and understanding the correlation, especially if you have an integrated education and training program as well. The next step, how do you find and locate some of these resources for yourselves, right? I've showed you examples across Michigan. I hope that's been helpful. Again, I would encourage you to think about where those resources are in your local area, in your own state. It may look different. It may be called something different, but those resources should exist. And if you need assistance in helping locate those resources, I think that we can provide that assistance for you and kind of pointing you in the right direction of who to go to. But here are some places to think about of where you might go first to engage in this conversation around apprenticeships. Chambers of Commerce, Small Business Administrations, your Department of Labor, your Workforce Development Board. An interesting space as well is listening to Legislative Workforce Development Committee hearings. In Michigan, just like other states, COVID pushed all of our public municipalities to do a lot of virtual or online meetings, as well as even tape in-person meetings. And so a lot of our uh, local legislative meetings, as well as our state legislature, tapes all of those meetings. And so identifying when they're talking about apprenticeship, when they're talking about adult education, you begin to start to listen to the conversation that's happening. And I would encourage you to go to some of these meetings with a fresh perspective. So maybe this one time you don't talk about adult education. Maybe you're just going to listen as a public, sit in the public gallery and listen to the conversation, what's happening. But being intentional about that, listening and understanding the dynamics that are happening around workforce and apprenticeship in each one of these spaces will serve you well. And it's a great place to meet people who are heavily engaged in not only decision making for apprenticeship, but the actual implementation and programming that you might ultimately partner with. So these would be good spaces to start to find where you can find those key partners. So now we've given you a lot to think about. Hopefully it's been helpful information. How do we make all of these things fit together? How do you take the data? How do you take the preparatory resources that you're gathering? How do you take that terminology and that language? And how do you then take who and identify who those key partners are that you would begin this dialogue with around the apprenticeship piece? What's important, and I want to point out, is that if you are already in your adult education program, engaged in a community college, a career technical education program, or you're already an approved WIOA integrated education and training program, you're halfway there. You're probably actually more than halfway there. Do you have a correct contextualized curriculum? Check. You already do. You're required under WIOA to have those provisions. You offer a diversified learning structure. Check. You do that, right? You offer different modalities for learning for different students. Do you offer individualized and customized learning approaches? Check. Adult education does that, right? You have intake processes. Sometimes you do goal setting with adult learners. You talk about what approach is going to take them the fastest and the best time to attainment to whatever their goal is. Do you understand employee needs? Check. You understand the needs of your learners. You understand the needs of employers if you're a part of a workforce landscape. That might be an investment area that you need to, but generally, many of our adult education programs across the country are doing those things. And then lastly, are you a state or federally approved program? That's what an apprenticeship partner will be looking for. Are you legit? Are you legitimate? Are you a person that we can not only trust, but has a track record and history of proven performance? As a state or federally funded approved program, that demonstrates that as well, right? So check for that as well. So if you meet those criteria, it's going to look a little bit different under an apprenticeship model, but that will lead you down the right path. You should be assured that you've met many of these metrics already. And if you're thinking about whether or not you're prepared to partner in an apprenticeship model with an entity or training provider, these would be the things to look for and to consider. And if you are already doing those things, you are well on your way to having not only a successful program, but being able to enhance your adult education experience for your providers as well. It's really kind of a tiered system or approach. I didn't lead with funding because I come from the space of we have to lead with practice before we can lead with funding, right? Funding kind of dictates our entire conversation a lot of times in adult education. And sometimes we have to think and envision about what is possible before we do drill down even further into the pragmatic piece, right? But I do think it's worth commenting and noting as you begin the dialogue and become more sophisticated and move through the different stages of understanding the data, understanding the terminology, understanding the players, you can then understand kind of the actual implementation of how do we make this work so that the funding covers everything that we need to. This is kind of, if you think about a continuum, the funding piece is kind of the more complicated piece of it. What's important is that adult education funding can meet the criteria for instruction, for certain IET costs, for integrated education training costs, for credit, Karyn mentioned that earlier, for high school completion. A training provider, an employer, and in the apprenticeship model can cover the costs for training, on the job training, right? They can cover things like stipends, which are often incentivizers for a lot of our adult education population. They can also supply work-ready resources, so the tools, the resources, the equipment, the uniforms that someone might need for on the job, depending on what industry their apprenticeship would be or what sector they're going into. They can cover many of those costs. And then together, the kind of key pieces related instructional costs, or if there's any wraparound supports for that individual because they're in adult education, together you can kind of fill the gap to cover that individual's cost. And so I know that that's an important piece of all of this, is like, this is great, but then how do we make it work? There are nuances here, but that is generally, what those related costs would be under a training provider for an apprenticeship and adult education, and where those costs might be shared as well. I want to just give you a quick example as we're kind of closing out our time, and then we'll do some Q&A. So in Michigan, our apprenticeship office and our adult education office and our adult education association came together a few years ago and created an opportunity for adult learners to directly enroll in apprenticeship in Michigan, and it's called MyStairs, the Michigan Statewide Targeted Apprenticeship Inclusion and Readiness System, MyStairs. We love acronyms in Michigan. We love acronyms that begin with MI because that is the acronym for our state. So MyStairs. It was a multi-pronged grant and it had two main goals. One was to accelerate adult learners into apprenticeship because they were considered an underserved population, right? And to integrate IET as the pre-apprenticeship into that, right? So that someone would come into adult education, they would enroll in adult education, they would learn through adult education, they would get the training through an integrated education program, training program, and they would go right into an apprenticeship. And there would be no stops, there would be no gaps, there would be no barriers to that outcome. The second was making adult education IET programs that pre-apprenticeship. That is something we're still working on. That is a vision as I have come into the leadership within our state, is how do we make our IETs more robust and enhanced and better partners with apprenticeship. We have some wonderful local directors who have done this on their own. We have a very rural program in northeastern Michigan that has prioritized this. We actually have Karyn's program in Southwest Detroit, which has already prioritized this. We have another urban program right outside of Detroit that has prioritized this as well through their IET. So there is a model there. We just want to amplify that and expand that. And then what was created was something called the MARC, the Michigan Apprenticeship Readiness Certificate. I'll leave that for you to explore, but essentially it's a multi-tiered system that you could align your IET program to. And then what that demonstrates in our state to employers is that an individual who has gone through one of our adult education IET programs and receives a MARC certificate based on the skills and the competencies that they demonstrate, they're ready to hire, or they're ready to enroll in an apprenticeship, or they're ready to interview, or they're guaranteed an interview, depending on the level of sophistication that the program is designed at. But it really helps that learner-centric model to say they enter and they will go all the way to completion to an apprenticeship, to apprenticeship model. So where do you start? I'll leave you with this. Try setting aside an hour a week for research on this. If it's on your calendar, you'll do it. If it's not on your calendar, you probably won't get to it, right? Our calendars dictate our lives now. And so I would prioritize setting aside some time to do this. Go to a local workforce development board meeting, talk to your apprenticeship or training coordinator, and just listen to what they have to say. Take some time to do that. and maybe talk, like I said, to some local employers about the needs that they're seeing. Really do your research and understanding first. Um, Identify that state agency that's responsible for apprenticeships. Research the plans and activities of the office that's there. They probably have a goal. They need more people to be engaged in this work. They're probably looking for more partners. They're probably looking for more educational partners. They're probably looking for folks that serve underserved populations. They're probably looking for more diverse representation in their apprenticeships. Adult education meets all of those criteria, right? Find a meeting. Look at those local plans, look at those local opportunities where you can just listen and start this path. I hope that this has been helpful to you. I'm happy to take questions that we have. I know we're coming to the end of our time, but really I want to encourage you all that you're on the right path. If you can follow this trajectory and follow these steps, you will begin to be a better partner on this apprenticeship landscape to understand how your program can seamlessly integrate with an apprenticeship, and you will be considered more than just a feeder of participants, right? Because that is sometimes what adult education is looked at, but a true valued and dedicated partner in the work. So, Karyn, I don't know if you want to take any questions at this time.
I've been tracking some of the questions, and I can't thank you enough, Patrick, for doing that. And plus, adding to some of your links. And the PowerPoint will be sent to everybody so that you will get a copy of this. And thank you so much for participating. And I hope you start on that way to even think about IETs or a pre-apprenticeship. Look at that MARC link just because it has a nice checklist and you can use that. So good luck, everybody. And I hope to see everybody at a conference talking about how great their apprenticeship programs are. And thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.